Hey guys, Yumi here. So lately I've been having like a popping or knocking sound from the front suspension, like going over small bumps in the road under 55 miles an hour. For the longest time I thought it was the sway bar links, but that didn't seem to fix the issue, so I'm thinking it's the subframe bushings. So today I'm gonna remove the subframe and swap out the bushings from the subframe. If you want to skip ahead to the removal and installation of the bushings, go to the time listed below. So first thing I'm going to do is disconnect the battery because there's a hanger for the subframe that's right behind the battery, and it makes it hard to access if the battery is there. I'll show you after I remove the battery. So like I said, the battery is blocking a hanger. This is the battery tray right here. And then you go further back here. This is where the hanger is right here, and then that's the bolt we need to remove later on. Next I'm going to be removing the intermediate steering shaft, or not removing, but like disconnecting the bottom, because the top part of the intermediate steering shaft has teeth on it, so it's a lot easier to keep it aligned if you take it from the bottom and then reconnect it afterwards, rather than taking the top off and then reconnecting that one after you're done. So next I'm going to start loosening the lug nuts on the front wheels and then jacking up the car. So I'm trying to lift up the car as high as possible with just jack and jack stands, and I put brick tiles underneath so I can elevate the jack stands a little bit without sacrificing the stability of the jack stands. And then also make sure you engage your parking brake and then put wheel chocks behind the back wheels. So basically how I have the car lifted and set up, I have jack stands taking on the weight over here in the front on top of a brick tile, and then I have like two steelies protecting it from falling, and then also another jack stand that's not touching anything just in case. And then I have the rear wheels put on rhino ramps I was originally going to put it on the brick tiles with a wheel chock, but the brick tiles are too small to fit a wheel chock, so I just opted for ramps. So next I'm going to remove the fasteners that are holding the fender liner so I can have easier access to some of the suspension parts. So I'm removing the fender liner, or peeling the fender liner back gives easier access for this hanger right here, especially on the right side. I don't know how it is. I think on the driver's side you don't need to do it because the hanger is located in a different spot. Next I'm going to disconnect the sway bar links so then the sway bar can be free. I'm just going to do this bottom part and keep the top part attached to the strut. And if you haven't replaced your sway bar links already, then you would need, for the open end wrench, you would need a 14mm, and then the other side for a socket you need 14mm, but I recently replaced with the genuine Nissan one, but for some reason the open end wrench that I needed to use right here on this stud was a 17mm instead of 14. And then just a tip, make sure you use a hex socket instead of this 12 point, just because last time I took out the sway bar link I was having a difficult time getting the nut off and it was rounding the head of the nut. So just so you don't round it or strip it, use a hex. So this is the lower control arm, and I'm going to keep it on the subframe because on the driver's side, this bolt right here is really difficult to reach and also take out if you have the automatic transmission. And then, so I'm going to take off the ball joint instead. I forget what size this is, but I'm going to remove this, and then I'm going to let this fall, I think, once I get a lot of the other bolts off for the subframe, instead of hammering it, because hammering is not very good, especially if you do it on the stud. You really shouldn't be hammering the stud up here once you get out the bolt. So I'm just going to try to let it naturally fall later on instead, and if it doesn't come out, I'll just hammer it, tap it lightly over here, like in the middle of the lower control arm. Sorry I couldn't get any better viewing angle from here because I don't have my smaller tripod, so I'm just doing it with my regular tripod. So the bolt we're taking out is a 14mm. I just tested it right now. You'll have to have a socket on one end and then one of these bad boys on the other side and pin it against something hard and metal on the car. And then I'm going to spray some WD-40 a little beforehand, so it's a lot easier to remove. So I got the bolt out for the lower control arm ball joint, and then I also got the nut on the other side, and I'm gonna put them back together and then try to keep them sorted and labeled and everything so I don't like mix things up with other suspension bolts. So another thing about nuts and bolts, I got some extra suspension nuts and bolts from the junkyard. It's a good idea to have extras in case the thread strips or the head rounds, or even if you lose one. So, and then I also use the junkyard as a way to practice removing the subframe beforehand, so I kind of have an idea of what I'm doing. So I put the floor jack right up against the subframe just so I can, just as a safety, and then also to lift and raise as need be once it get a lot of it off. And then I know it's gonna take more than a day, so I might put some of my extra brick tiles underneath instead of the jack. So yeah. Next I'm gonna take off the bracket. There's 4 bolts, 2 on each side. One right here, and then one right here. So it's getting a little dark already. I'm gonna wrap up pretty soon, but I'm also just gonna do the hanger bracket over here in the engine bay and then wrap things up. And then the bolt size is 18mm. You may need to use an extension or a breaker bar just to reach it and get good leverage. So I misspoke about the bolt size. It's a 17mm instead of an 18, and then the mass airflow sensor is in my way, like the way the intake is set up, so I took it off. The connector is really difficult to get off, so I just took off the whole thing and then wrapped it in plastic in a rubber band. I'm probably gonna cover that hole too. Hey guys, so it's day 2. I'm like halfway done with removing the subframe, but the next thing I'm gonna do is remove the other hanger, and then disconnect the power steering rack from the subframe if I can. I think I need to use like a flex head ratcheting breaker bar. And then there's like a few other bolts here and there that I need to take off. So the hanger on the other side is right here. This is the upper part. That is also 17mm, and yeah. So I got the bolt off for the passenger side hanger on the top. It's kind of hard. I couldn't get a good view of it because the fender liner kept getting in the way. Make sure you just have to pull it back while you're working on it. You could even like take off the bottom part so you can take it off even more, or even like up here, remove those fasteners as well. And then next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna remove the bolts on the transmission mount. This one right here, because it's straight up and down, whereas some of these other ones go sideways. It's a lot easier to do this one when you could just lift and lower it. So it turns out I had to take off both of these bolts, this one right here and this one right here. I already took off that one, but the back one also connects to the transmission, so I need to take that one off too. And then the size of these bolts are both 18mm. So like I said before earlier in the video, for the ball joint on the lower control arm, after loosening enough bolts, it should be easy to lower it. In my case, I don't need to use a hammer or tap anything. I could just use my hands and lower it. Like you can see already some of the work I've done. See that gap there? That's just with my hands. And I have the jack up like 1/2 centimeter away from the subframe, just so it doesn't fall all of a sudden or whatnot. But yeah, that's the progress I made just with using my hands. Now I'm gonna remove this U-shaped bracket that holds like the connector for the power steering rack, and that's a 12mm. There's this other bracket, it's like 3-sided, right next to the foil right here. I should probably take off too so it's not tugging on the harness. The size for this bracket is a 10mm. So next I'm going to remove the mounting nuts for the power steering rack right here. And these are 17mm nuts. On the underside of the stud or the bolt or whatever is a 14mm, but it's very shallow. So there's already a clip there, so it won't move when you're turning the nut up here. So I just finished disconnecting the nuts for the power steering rack, and now I'm just gonna lower the subframe. So all of the bushings I'm replacing are Siberian color bushings, except for the cross-member bushings, because when I ordered these, Siberian didn't make any cross-member bushings at the time, but then like 1 or 2 weeks later they added it to their catalog. So I mean, I kind of want the Siberian ones, but I don't want to wait around and pay extra for that. And then for the these PSB bushings I got from Amazon. They're like $30-$40, and they don't come with shells, so you have to take out the original rubber shell and like drill it out or burn it, chisel it out and stuff. Still pressing it. And then I also got these S13-240SX subframe collars, bushing collars, because in case there's extra room on here, just to make the handling a little stiffer, and so it doesn't squeak. And then, so I also printed out these diagrams from the official Nissan repair manuals. This one was to find out the torque specs for each part and everything. This is from the front suspension manual, page 10 for the 2009. It may be on a different page if you have a different model year within the same generation, because like the manufacturer changes it from year to year for some reason. And then I also printed out this diagram from the Siberian Bushings website. This is the front subframe, and it shows numbers, and all these numbers correspond to the parts that I ordered, or the parts they have, the bushings they offer for this specific part. And then I also have my Haynes repair manual. There are some parts in here that it's really hard to find within the official Nissan repair manuals, so it's good to have on hand. I also printed this part out for power steering, the page 12 of power steering manual for the 2009 Nissan Versa. It shows, because we're going to be disconnecting the power steering rack
for this job, and we would have to know the mounting torque specs, which looks like it's 69 foot-pounds from what I'm seeing, but I'll discuss this later.
Now that I got the subframe off, I'm gonna remove the hangers and sway bar, and then after that I'm gonna press the bushings. And the tool I'm gonna use is this ball joint press I got from Advanced Auto Parts for about $250. I'll show you the technique after I'm done removing the sway bar and the hangers. Sorry if you can't hear me very well, it's very windy right now. So as I said before, the bolts that attach the sway bar are 12mm bolts. Sorry if I couldn't get a good video angle, because my tripod fell and broke, so I have to like lean my phone against something on the ground. But anyway, I just got the sway bar off, and then I'm gonna work on the hangers. So, I can't get the bolt completely off. I think this is the main culprit, like the main bushing that's gone bad, because like the rubber is like a full 360 and the bolt follows with it, so like can't get it out just yet. I'll have to figure something out. But yeah, and it was making a lot of squeaking noises while I was turning the wrench, so it's probably like the rubber rubbing against each other, and you can see like some of the rubber's flaking off right there, I think. And also it's like rusted out too, the shell part. So I removed and replaced 2 of the hanger bushings with the ball joint press. And the way to use the ball joint press is when you're removing, you would want to catch it with one of the cups. I guess you can call it a receiving cup, but the receiving cup, it has a little notch here that goes in here, and then you want to make sure it's completely going around the bushing but having contact with the part itself, so then it has enough, I guess you could say it has leverage, because you're trying to push the bushing out from the part. And then for pushing it, the pushing side, I'm gonna use a 30mm impact socket and put it against the pushing stud and put it against the bushing, and I'm going to put it all the way around here, and then this is the outer ring or shell and I want to get completely out, and it has contact with the outer shell, so I should get it out. But it's also big enough that it'll make contact with the part, so I might have to hammer the rest of the way out. I have the receiving end here, and then the 30mm impact socket against the bushing. And then you're supposed to turn the stud with either a 22mm or a 7/8 socket. And you can preferably use a breaker bar, because it gets really difficult near the end.
So I got both of the bushings out. The way to install it is reverse, and then the way to put it in is, this part is like the top, so it goes this way. Like this part is curved, it's the inlet I guess, and then the outlet is the side with the collar. So to identify which bushings we need, we're looking at this diagram from Siberian bushings, and then this is the hanger that we're working with. So these are numbered 1 and 2. Number 1, the part number ends in 541, and it's this one right here. And then number 2, this one, it ends in 3321, which is this other one right here. And then I'll show you how to press them in. So this right here is the 541 bushing, and this one goes on the straight part of the hanger. And then this is the 3321 bushing right here, and this goes on the L-shaped part.
So I finished the bushings on this hanger. I'm gonna replace that one later, maybe, I don't know. But you gotta push it until the collar of like the outer shell is flush with the surface of the part. So onto the cross member bushings. You gotta make sure your receiving cup is long enough to handle the bushing, like catch it. This is the only one I could find, but this is like for the pushing side, like the one where the stud goes in. I think it'll work, I guess, but you gotta make sure it catches the inner shell, but it doesn't, but it's pushing against the outer shell. At least for these bushings, because these bushings don't come with the shell, so you have to retain the original ones. You gotta leave the bigger shell onto the subframe. And this cup will do for the bottom part for pushing it out, the inner shell. And it also it fits snug on the receiving side, so pretty good. And I might have to do this tomorrow. It's starting to get dark, and also this is really heavy, so for the inner shells, I already cleaned them. Like, I burnt off a lot of the rubber and chiseled it, and then also filed it down by hand because I didn't have a Dremel tool. But anyway, onto the outer shells. I'm not burning them because there's a lot of grease accumulated on the subframe. I don't think it's very safe to burn anything. So I chiseled a lot of the rubber out, and then I used a drill with the grinding bit. I was gonna use a wire wheel, but I don't have one right now, so I'm just using this right here for getting the bulk of the rubber out. And then I use like a grinding stone to polish the rest, something like this. Now I'm going to add silicone grease to the shell, as well as this shell and the bushing, so then it's easy to install. And then I also put Teflon tape on the shell and the bushing to prevent future squeaking, even though silicone grease is supposed to do the same thing, but it lasts a lot longer. So I pressed in the poly bushings right here, so the cross member. I used a clamp to get the poly part of it in. I tried hammering it, but the polyurethane is really tough, and then it was really slippery with a lot of grease in there and stuff like that. So, but working with the clamp, you have to make sure it's balanced right and like even. You have to push one way or another just to make sure it doesn't slip out. And then for this, I just pushed it, the inner shell, I pushed it in by hand, then tapped it with a hammer a little bit, and then pressed it in with the ball joint press. The reason why I use the ball joint or the clamp for
the polyurethane bushing is because the press doesn't quite reach, because there's like a lot of room between the edge and the bushing. So I also need to reinstall the sway bar. I am gonna replace the bushing, the sway bar bushing, with the OEM one that's rubber. Same process as here. Lube it up with some silicone grease. You don't need to do Teflon tape because rubber doesn't squeak or anything. So I got the sway bar right here. Basically, it's under this U-shaped mount. It should slide off. There's like a little gap here and you peel it off. So it's fairly easy, and then you remount it onto these holes. And I'm gonna skip a time lapse just like before because I don't have a tripod to work with. So if you guys want to know what the part number for the sway bar bushings are, it's 54613 EL000. You can also upgrade to poly bushings for the sway bar, but I chose not to because I bought these like way before and I never had the time to put it in. But I know Powerflex and Siberian make polyurethane sway bar bushings if you guys are interested. And I'll link all the products in the description below.
Thanks guys for watching my video. Sorry I haven't posted in a while. I've been really busy this past year. So, I finally have some time on my hands now though. I am off of work for the week, so I have some extra time to edit some videos. So I'll be posting a couple more videos this week, so stay tuned for that. This video's been on the back burner for a while now. I originally filmed it like in January 2021. It's just a lot of video footage to like, sort through, but I hope you guys like it. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure to click that like button if you really liked it. I see comments too, so you can comment down below too as well if you'd like to. Thanks. Bye.